Rob, do you want to add your camera? Hi, everyone. Welcome to 2022 Detour Ahead. Today, we've got Gary Stewart, who's going to talk about his practice and what he's up to. It's kind of, we're talking about synchronicity and other things and threads of connection in earlier lectures for cultural maneuvers. And interestingly enough, my wife has actually worked with Gary on a project that maybe he'll touch upon at some point. But it's funny how these kind of connections, I don't know Gary personally, but Rob is a good friend of Gary's, and through Detour Ahead, we found that we've got this mutual connection. And I think, you know, that really kind of highlights the kind of the way the creative industry works and how you have these different contacts and different networks that you can draw upon. And yeah, we're really honored to have Gary to kick us off, and really looking forward to this first talk. And so Rob, I don't know if you want to give Gary a proper introduction, but yeah, welcome to Detour Ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome, Gary. We were lucky to have Gary with us I think it was back in 2016, and you know, I've known Gary for a bit over 10 years, and initially in his role as in a curatorial role, working at Innova, and I've learned so much from Gary in different roles with his artistic practice, his workshopping, his collaborative work with Trevor Matheson, performance, and I think I'll let Gary speak for himself. But welcome, Gary, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation from UEL. It's a real pleasure to be here. Seems we have digital intervention already. I heard the introduction, the first bit from Rob, and then it cut off, and now I'm back again. So I'll just assume that you said very kind words about me. I'm going to keep the sort of like who I am pretty brief, so that we can start looking at work. But it's interesting what Dan just said, just touching on that about the creative industries and the sort of like the way that everything's interconnected, because I think you'll see as I go through my projects that that's certainly been one of the kind of main dynamics of not just my practice and work, but the way that I get sort of like commissions and the way that projects evolve over a certain amount of time, that there's this kind of cross-fertilization between different spaces and disciplines. And I think that's pretty much why I said right in the center of there that I describe myself as an interdisciplinary artist. What I really enjoy is moving between different disciplines. The fact that I'm an associate artist in the English and Drama department at Queen Mary University, but I'm also a lecturer in the studio practice at Goldsmiths, means that I can move between those different spaces and have one feed the other. It's probably worth saying that whilst I like aesthetics and art and art for art's sake, most of my practice is driven by a desire to make change in it, and I have a particular interest in sort of like disadvantaged and marginalized peripheral communities, and I may well talk about some of the work that I've done in Brazil and India and Colombia and other places, Uganda, which speak to that. I also, although I get commissions as an artist, as a singular artist, the thing that really kind of like excites me is often the kind of collective practice, really, the way that you work with other people, the way that your practice itself shifts and changes, and you challenge your assumptions about work, and the way that people, that when I say people, that is audiences, can be implicated in that kind of like space of authorship. So I love the fact that pieces emerge and evolve through kind of like shared authorship, so to speak. And lastly, just before I start showing something, I work across, I mean, I've written down there's sound, movement, image, and performance, but that's driven by the fact that my background is in, my degree was in electronics and computing, but I lived in the fine art department of the university, and indeed went into community arts when I left that, then into desktop publishing in the late 80s, CD-ROM production, internet, curator for 15 years and head of digital media at a contemporary arts organization. And I've been freelance over the last 12 years, working on a variety of different projects, both within the white cube space, that is, you know, the normal kind of like tape, Arnafini, Serpentine, and out in the field on social justice projects. So between there and academia. So, all right, I'm going to start off by, let's start off by just playing a short clip, which was for a presentation that I did in Uganda back in 2016. So it just covers projects from 2007 to 2016, but it's a good kind of start. Okay, so if we can show that first video. So if we can show, it's the second video that's in that. And I'll just take it back to the beginning. Thanks, that's great.
What is black? What is it? What is this thing that we define? Is it something tangible or something that we can't define?
Da oficina aqui do Gary, foi uma oficina muito boa, uma oficina que possibilitou jovens a abrir seus horizontes e estarem desenvolvendo sua criatividade através da videoarte.
E a partir daí nós fomos pesquisar um pouco dos sonhos dos moradores da Providência.
First of all, it was cold. Very, very cold.
I got my mind to leave home and I decided and start coming to England.
It was hard, but you have to. What else could you do?
When I come to this country, I can't remember who received me.
right, yeah, dog. And I can afford it.
What's the matter?
Oh, my tummy,
What's the
the
matter?
the baby's coming.
What's the matter? Just calm down. Just calm down. Just calm down. Just cool down. Just calm down.
We carry on with the soundscape sonar produced by dub morphology, specific to the performance, but very much playing on the notion of call and response.
Mission log. Date 11th to the 15th of February 2015. Location Tate, Britain. Coordinates 51, 29, 28 degrees north, 07, 37 degrees west. Mission to research which memories we choose to keep and which memories we choose to erase, and what lies in the gaps. 1. Anamnesis. Of our human sample, 98% deposited a keepsake memory. From what time do we remember? The little boy shoots up his hand. The night time. No, says another. It's the day before yesterday. Human rights lawyer Martin Day remembers the old Kenyans knocking on his door in the middle of the night. They had a memory they needed to share before they died. Why did they need to share it? Asks a woman. Justice, he replied, no matter how vague.
Look at Hisa always dissolving with people. Yeah, do you notice what he does? Yeah. He's constantly in dissolve mode.
Thank you. Right. If we could go back to the screen with my mind map. So yeah, if we could share my mind map, and then I'll continue talking. That's great. Fantastic. So where to begin? So you can see from I think that gives you a kind of sense, even though it's the only between 2007 and 2016, those projects, just a range of different projects that I worked on. And I just want to go back a little bit to what inspired me in terms of my own particular journey. And as I mentioned, my degree was actually in electronics and computing, and but I lived in the fine art department. And what I enjoyed about the fine art department was actually just hanging out in the sound studio there. There was this remarkable technician called Jan Kapinski, who actually had his own jazz band called Pinsky Zoo. And he would encourage the students, including myself, who wasn't even on the fine art course, to use the studio and to experiment with, at that time, analog tape loops, and really encourage us to kind of improvise and create experimental music using analog synthesizers. And I think there was something about being in that environment which I found remarkably inspiring, and a combination of that and my own particular interest in building things. I was in a sound system at that time called Turbo Black Arts, and I was building the sort of the electronic sirens and preamps and the electronics for the sound system. And although in retrospect it was clear that I kind of I spanned all these different disciplines, because I also had, at that time when I was at college, I got a grant from East Midland Arts to write a book of poetry called Dide El Yassil, which was an oral history project. So already I was showing this real interest working across different mediums. I was hanging out in the community arts center using the offset litho and the sort of like the offset litho, and playing around with lithography and photography, and then recording film, the kind of high speed film. So moving between all these different practices. And whilst that was really quite amorphous, when I applied for and got this research grant in 1989 to go to San Francisco, and this was an Arts Research Award from the Arts Council, it really began to bring these different elements of my practice together, in so much as I was able to see and experience projects which were beginning to suggest that you didn't just have to work in one particular way, but could move between art and technology and science. So I think what I'll do now is I'd like to go through I won't go through all my website because there's too much work on there, but I'll now, if we can just look at my website, and I'll just speak to it. Okay, so share that. Let's have a look. Okay, so if you could get my website on screen, then excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to cherry pick some stuff. So because I haven't updated my website since December 2018, which is sort of embarrassing, but not embarrassing. It's embarrassing from the point of view of the website has now become a problem in so much as I've got so much material on there, it's difficult to keep up with it. But it hasn't in any way stopped me from getting any work. So you can make of that what you will, really. But let's go back a little bit. So I'm going to start with this project, which is, although it says 1987 on there, it's actually 1990. It's just I acquired the bass line, which is a electronic analog bass machine, in 1987. And the reason why I want to start with this one is because it's really quite fascinating that. So recorded a couple of 12 inches in the acid genre of music with another musician called Anuradha Das, who's a founder member of Asian Dub Foundation. And together we did these 12 inches because we used to, you know, like any young person at that time, used to go to raves. The most bizarre thing happened, which was they were released as a limited edition. I think there was only like a couple of hundred of them were released back in 1990. But during lockdown in 2020, I received an email from somebody saying that they wanted to re-release it. I actually thought it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. What had happened was that I've been told that by the recording label that eventually reissued our records, was that there was a DJ in Manchester who had included the tracks as part of a compilation, and it had drawn real interest from people in Berlin and Switzerland and elsewhere. So I'm just going to, okay, I think I'm going to try and play just a little clip from there. Oops, let me just get this in the right place. Okay. Hold on a moment. Link. Okay, hopefully this is loading now. So I'm just going bass chords where they have it ready to be released. It's the 12-inch. So I'm going to play the second part of it. It's only a 2-minute section. The track itself is 10 minutes long, and there's four versions of it. So let's just find that. Apologies that this is taking so long. Okay, so let's hopefully if we can share that screen now of Juno. That's great, thank you. Right, I'm just going to play a 2-minute section as well. Great. Thank you for showing that. If we could just go back to, let me think. Let's go back to the website, and I'll just speak a little bit about that. Thank you. So, what was interesting about that is not only the fact that it was picked up again 30 years later, but that the actual production of that was based on like one take improvisation, which then was dubbed and remixed in the studio. And in the age-old tradition of somebody like, I guess, if you know anything about dub music and reggae music, where the engineer is just as important as the artist, that was certainly the case with this, where yes, it was Anirudh Das and myself as the artist playing the stuff and improvising, but actually Felix, who was the studio engineer that day, was having a great time sort of riffing and playing with us. And so all of that was recorded to like a 16, believe it or not, a 2-inch tape, 16-track tape recorder. And it was my first use of also using really crude samples and drones, along with the kind of acid modulations. And Oni was doing these incredible sort of like odd time signatures and everything else. And then it all came together. Okay, so, right. Let me just talk a little bit more about another project. And I'll just speak to it rather than just playing clips and everything. So, so I shot a production, a theatre production for Channel 4 in 1992 called Rock and Roll Jordan. And so again, this is an example of me moving between disciplines. And at one point, I thought I was going to become a camera person because I actually was ACTT certified, so I trained to be a camera person and everything else. But I found it at that time to be too restrictive in terms of the things that I wanted to do. I kind of like working between so many different kind of disciplines that whilst I enjoyed that production, I didn't continue that as a profession. 1993, did a performance at ICA in London, again with Anirudh Das, for a season that was curated by Keith Khan. And this is interesting. So I don't know, back in the day, there was a program called Desmond's. And remarkable thing is, at this time, when I did, this is an animation that I did. In fact, I'm going to show it in a moment. No, you know what? I'll show it first. That makes sense, and I'll speak about it. So it's really short. Let me just play it first, and then I'll talk about it.
Trying to make a better life for ourselves. Trying to make a better life for ourselves.
Look at them now. Close, computers, opportunities. Children are so ungrateful. They never had it so good.
This is it. We got hip hop coming for you. Yes.
No. It's not reacting to where we can start it. No.
Yes. Demon Barber wins again.
Okay, let me speak a little bit about this project. So, back in the 90s, whoops, let's just stop at that a moment. So, yeah, back in the 90s, I was making CD-ROM productions health authorities. I mean, I was a tutor actually at a place called the Arts Technology Centre in Islington, which is a centre set up to explore the creative applications of computers. And I was running a multimedia workshop there and making CD-ROMs for basically health authorities. And one of them in particular was around, at that time, HIV and AIDS, using nonlinear narratives. So, in other words, you would click on this thing, and if you bought the condoms, there'd be consequences. Or if you didn't buy the condoms, there'd be different kind of consequences. So you'd have these branching narratives. And a person called Mark Wu saw that project and brought it to the attention of a productions company based in Camden for Channel 4 called Humphrey Barclays. And they really, really liked it and invited me to do the animation sequence for Desmond's for Channel 4. And what's interesting about this project is, so I used to do animation in a program called Macromedia Director, and I started doing animation in that when it was just an animation program. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, they added interactivity to it so that you could code it and so you could create rudimentary games, whatever. So they asked me to actually just create a simulation so that when they filmed it, they could pretend to be playing the game. But what happened was I made the simulation and I took it to Kennington, where their rehearsal studios was. And it was just so difficult. It was almost impossible for them to interact with it. So they said, you've got to make it into a real game. So over the course of the next week, I made it into a real game, a real platform game. And that's what you saw actually in there, was a platform game that I sort of created in Director. So it's an interesting insight into sometimes if you simulate something as well, it's really, really difficult, particularly for actors to work with it. It's got to be the real thing. Okay, so that was that project. So it's 11:05, so I'll go a bit quicker so that we can at least get to current projects. Let's have a look. So, oops. So we won't do lift inquiry. Okay, this was the first commission for a museum and gallery that myself and a collaborating artist called Trevor Mattison had. And we formed a group called Dub Morphology almost 20 years ago. And basically, they had a museum called Trade and Empire in place. The National Maritime Museum is in Greenwich. And they're about to refurbish it and to create an exhibition space called Atlantic World. And we were commissioned to create the visuals in there. And what was fascinating, visuals and soundtrack actually. And what was interesting about this project was it was the first time I worked in HD. Sounds ridiculous now, as soon as you can get HD on your phone. I'm actually doing this talk to you on the screen that I bought in 2007, early in 2007, a 30-inch, half-full-inch screen that I had to buy, and it cost me huge amounts of money in order to create the visual for this piece. And it was also interactive, so those discs that you see there with the projections, you could move your hand and it would interact. There were like sensors in there. And it was also the first time working with a project and collection experts where this dialogue between artists who wanted to work, particularly myself, in what you might call a non-didactic, non-literal way, that is to use symbolism and metaphor rather than just literally talking about the traumatic events of the Atlantic slave trade in a way that just merely stated it, but you rather used the emotional register and whatever. So that was quite interesting. Okay, let me just move on. Okay. At this point, was a piece for the Talbot Gallery in New York with a filmmaker called Ali Saeed. I was still programming work in Director, and this is an interactive piece. Ali Saeed is a really brilliant sort of like filmmaker who had prior to this project had made a story told as a triptych 3-piece installation, and I worked with her to make it into an interactive piece with again a kind of branching sequence which enabled you the viewer to, depending on where they clicked, take different routes through the piece itself. Okay, Meltdown. This is a bittersweet project. So Trevor and I were asked to do the visuals for Massive Attack's Meltdown at the South Bank in 2008. And there's actually a brilliant write-up. I'd urge you to go to my website and read it because it really talks about it. So we were doing the visuals in the space when the actual structure of the building began to shake so much. These are the days of dubstep, remember, early days of dubstep. So they had to, literally, there were pieces of aluminium, as it states here, began to crack and break free from the ceiling when we were playing and doing the visuals. So they had to relocate it to the Royal Festival Hall, which meant that we no longer were doing the visuals because this is going to be by bittersweet. One moment you're doing the visuals for the Massive Attack dubstep Chronicles South Bank, next moment you're not because the building's falling apart. So that was that. Right, coming to 10 past, let's go quicker. Another projection installation in Barbados. This Barbados in the West Indies in the Parliament building with Trevor Mattison. And this is a project which illustrates the way that I work quite often with national collections and materials. The National Maritime Museum was the first time when I worked with the collection, but there at in Barbados we had archival material that we were able to call upon there in order to make another piece there. And I love that combination of working with the official record, that is the official collection, and generating new and contemporary material which you mix in and dynamically experience. Okay, so that was that project. Visuals for Jazzy B at Tate Britain. So that was the first kind of like later Tate event that Trevor and I did from Dub Morphology, and we've done a lot of them. And let me go back a bit. So that would be, there's something interesting about creating work in situ where there is a collection as well. So that's in just next to the Devines in Tate Britain, for those who know the space. And the event itself was about British music, and it made for quite a powerful environment to be situated within the Tate, within a national collection, and then creating new visuals in that space. Okay, so Big Chill, so we played at festivals as well. Martinique. This was an interesting project where, oops, go back. Illustrated the way, again, working with the collection. This was a former sugar plantation, which was now a distillery, and we created a piece in situ. And what I loved about this piece was the way that we also mic'd up the grounds so that we had the sound coming into the space, and then it would remix live, which created this evolving, mutating piece. In fact, you know what? Let me just play a little bit of it, and you can hear. So So in essence, you get this idea of a fixed piece which we've filmed and a soundtrack that we've made, but also the chance elements that come from bringing in material from outside that you can't legislate for. And it's that sense of risk taking that remains within my work, really. So I'll just play a little bit of it. I think, will it play? Yes, here we go.
What is black? What is it? This thing that we define? Is it something tangible? Is it something that we can't define? What is What is it?
Ceux qui n'ont inventé ni la poudre ni la boussole, ceux qui n'ont jamais su dompter la vapeur et la l'électricité, ceux qui n'ont exploré les mers, le ciel, ils savent que c'est l'un.
Right, I better speed up because there's not much time. Work in Brazil, creating visuals, and sort of like video mapping them in the favelas. So that was work. Sorry, let's go back a moment. So that was work that I did between actually 2010 and 2014 in Brazil. Let's go forward. Onifini. Let's have a look. That's project for the Tate Tanks opening. Ooh, go back. This was a projection that I did as an Olympic Commission in 2012. So on Hive Beach, which is a kind of like part of the Jurassic Coast, by Bridgeport, I worked with this amazing cellist called Benjamin Wow. Sorry, Matthew Benjamin is there. And we did 2 days of projections on the beach there. And the material that was actually projected was came through my interaction with people from the sort of like university who are researching around the sort of like Jurassic Coast, and also talking to people who are actually on the coast and have different kind of like professions based around sort of like netting and fishing and whatever. And also back in the past, it was a place where pirates used to be, believe it or not, because it was so dangerous. I think it's still a dangerous place. Okay, that's Tate Tanks at Tate Modern in 2012. More Brazilian projects, Brazil. I've also filmed quite a lot for with a performer called HKB Finn. So in a sense, this is me going back to my early roots from the Channel 4 production stuff, where I enjoyed going back to filming stuff. And whereas I shot the stuff for Channel 4 with like a 3-tube camera, one of those heavyweight things on your shoulder, by, as you can imagine, all these years later, like 12 years later, I was using much smaller DSLRs. More work in Brazil, performance in Tate Modern, and it's another gallery piece, more filming. Apologies for going so quickly. Just give you, let's look. More pieces. All right. So I'm trying to get to. Oh, this was an interesting project. So this was going back to my interest in telemedia and telemetric projects, which was about connecting two different disparate spaces. And in this instance, it was a shared project between, a shared space between West London and Gaza. And but what you ended up with was a virtual space where the two kind of spaces overlaid with each other, a third space, so to speak, where each space was occupied by participants from the two disparate spaces. And it was initiated by a company called Station House Opera, and I was one of the artists who was invited to be part of the creation of the piece itself. Okay, then I was working in Uganda, more work at Tate Britain. Oops, that's a video mapping project in St. Mary's Church in Walthamstow. Performance piece at the BFI. Okay. This is a fashion show I did in Brazil in 2018. So filming the fashion designers. It was all around the work of a fashion designer from the 1970s called Angel Zuzu. And let's have a look. And then there's me performing with Trevor Mattison at the Royal Academy for the 250th year celebrations with my instruments, my Octatrack. So, got 10 minutes. I don't even know how to do this in 10 minutes. Let's perhaps go to, if we could go back to my, let's have a look. I'm just going to speak to my mind map again, I think. So if we could share my mind map again. Thank you. So, wow, I've got 10 minutes. That's not long. All right. So, what am I working on now? Perhaps I have to just cut to the chase. What am I working on now? 2022. Let's have a look. So, I am currently working on a workshop and sound installation as part of a project called Wetland Dwellers in Sheffield. Okay, that's great. So, on Saturday coming, in fact, I'll be doing like I do. A lot of my projects are based on field recordings when I'm working with sound. So I'll be doing field recordings as we walk around this particular setting in a wildlife trust in Sheffield with an invited group of people as well. And then based on that, I'll then create a sound installation, which will be shown, set up in situ a month later. And it's a good example of the way I work in terms of, whilst it's based on field recordings and then I'll be recording people, I like to use both actual and real sounds and synthesized sounds. So creating the sounds using a variety of analog and digital sound making machines, because I love that sort of like interplay between sort of like real and fictional, both sonics and visuals. I like the kind of metaphors and the way that you can play around with that and the way that you can make it quite fluid. So I'm doing a sound design for an installation with a really brilliant artist called Erica Tan. That's next month. I've got a big commission at the V&A, which opens in June, which is around African fashion. And I'm doing the sound and visuals for that. And that's a particularly interesting project because although I've been commissioned as an artist, I have to work quite closely with the lighting designers and the people who are doing the structure, and obviously the curators within the V&A. And so there's a dynamic there in terms of what their expectations are in terms of audiences, and mine, which is far more, I would say, more, what would I say? My kind of contribution is a great deal more sort of like abstract, so to speak. Okay. Also, Dub Morphology has got a South Bank sound installation in June, and this is linking the Grace Jones Meltdown at the South Bank and an exhibition called The Black Fantastic, which is happening in August. So that's going to be outside. Last year it was done by Linton Kwesi Johnson. So that's going to be interesting. And I've also got commissioned to do a sound installation at St. Paul's Cathedral. And that's in, St. Paul's Cathedral is 18th of August. So that's a sound and visual installation. And basically 50 artists, well, not artists, 50 different people have been asked to respond to 50 different monuments within St. Paul's, basically. So I'm one of 50 invited guests. What else? Live coding, for those who know what live coding is. So this is both visual and sound live coding project with Vivid in Birmingham. Last Shift is a production, a theatre production about Black miners. So I'll be creating a soundtrack for that, and I'm actually going in a couple of months. I'll be going down into the mines to record them, and then creating a sound piece from that. And just a couple more things, which this award, one of 6 artists who's got an award from University of Greenwich to look at diversity in experimental sound. And as you can see, there'll be a performance vinyl to a record that comes out of that, and a book. And I'm working on a year-long project which opens actually in December at St. Mary's Church in Walthamstow. And that's a really exciting project because it's a permanent sound installation. So I'm working with the architects on that. And that's going to be based on a series of workshops that I'm doing right now. I started it last week. I'm doing them every Wednesday. First, initially with Leighton Sixth Form College, with students who are on their kind of like media production course there. And they're going to be going out and collecting various different stories. So it's like an oral history project, but also collecting field recordings and sounds around Walthamstow. And then we're going to play around with sound synthesis, and then I'll go on to work with other groups during the course of the year around Walthamstow to weave this not only contemporary idea of what Walthamstow is in terms of the different diverse communities there, but also create a piece which responds to the history of St. Mary's Church itself. Okay. Right, I've been remiss in looking at questions. Oh, right. Let's have a read. Tell us about the spirit concept of dub. How does that inform dub morphology's work? Good question. Well, the reason why we're called dub morphology is literally morphology is because of this idea of shifting, changing, this almost like a polymorphic form, that things that the way ideas, the way you move between different ideas and concepts and themes, and that's critical. dubbing so much as on this idea of version and remaking, that there's no one static way of doing something, that something is a continued evolving piece. And also this notion of improvisation. And so that's, in a sense, dub provides this really fascinating framework to enable the freedom to relinquish yourself of the requirement to just work in a fixed way where you presume or I guess try and anticipate what an outcome is. Rather, you have to feel it and move through it through actually doing. Oh, here's another question. Would you say you were doing a sort of dub version of old film extracts, field recording, remixing, and adding a visual reverb echo into it to make them more intense? Certainly am, and in fact, that's exactly what happened with the Harry Core workshop that we did at the BFI, Trevor and myself, where we were commissioned to basically remix the Francis Ford Coppola film, The Conversation, and we remixed the film, and then we dubbed it up and played live, actually within the BFI space. And that's a perfect illustration of kind of like using known material, but playfully playing with history, kind of like almost like bending time. So, you know, creating these juxtaposition of opposing type materials, but connecting stuff, kind of cross-cutting between material, and this idea of this like loop that continually, in a sense, the glitch or degrades, if you see me. So I really enjoy that idea of seemingly how you sort of like reiterate an idea or a theme, but constantly as you watch it, you may notice that it's just subtly changed or moved or shifted. So this idea that you can't completely fix something. Let's see if there's any other questions. No. Maybe I'll just keep on talking until I'm told not to talk. So, I mean, to reiterate, really, the basis of my practice is really moving between, as an interdisciplinary artist, not only different types of media, but also different spaces and some different kind of like disciplines, in so much as I love working with scientists, historians, writers, poets, dancers, filmmakers, photographers, and thinking of innovative and creative ways of how all of those different kind of disciplines might cross-fertilize and sort of like speak to each other to make a piece that continually is experienced by the audience or participant within an interactive space that means that the piece is never static but continually shifts and evolves. Oh, do you have book, music, art recommendations from people that take this approach to dub remix approach to art? I certainly do. I think I would look at the Otolith group and Kojo Eshin, certainly. The work of definitely Honorada Das is brilliant in that realms. Paula Desire, in terms of like artists who I think really illustrate that really kind of amazing way of remixing in the moment a piece of work in an improvisational way, which doesn't presuppose that there's one fixed narrative, but rather a number of different alternative ways of reading a message and material. And in a sense, the idea of doing that is not to disorientate or the audience or the viewer, but rather to empower them with a sense of the fact that it's into that space and there's no one fixed way of seeing something, and that much of my practice is about creating these safe spaces where people are encouraged to feel that they can articulate opposing views in a way that is respectful of other perspectives, to something that speaks to, that sound like a hippie, speaks to kind of like encouraging human beings to not to have a sense of respect for cultures who are normally disenfranchised and outside of the normal kind of they don't have the normal or access to articulating their thoughts and preoccupation. What is your favorite piece of artwork? No pressure. I would like, well, one of the most haunting pieces of the work still to me is he's sadly dead now, but Chris Marker, who did San Soler and La Jetée tape slide productions, and you'd think that just having a series of slides with commentary and music wouldn't that you'd be thinking, oh, I'm just watching a tape slide production, but actually what he created was this remarkable and amazing kind of means to completely not just transfix you, but transport you into an entire different world of imagination, if you see what I mean, using the remarkable kind of like ability to juxtapose material in a way that more than the sum of the parts. I mean, I'm not stolen. I've been inspired by Chris Marker on various projects because, and I love doing it in workshops where seemingly just with a diptych or a triptych with very basic material, you can create the framework for creating new imaginative worlds. And what would seem to be really quite, again, obvious and didactic can be elevated into something entirely different. So I would say that methodology is something that I really enjoy, and I really I think it's worth saying as well, Brian, that it's not about, you'll hear this time and time again, it's not about the technology. I move between sort of like what might be considered as rather crude analog technology and cutting edge digital technology, you know, in terms of augmented reality, VR, telemetric projects. But I also love working with film and the way it degrades and the interplay between the two of them, really, if you see what I mean. I think there's something for not getting bogged down in thinking that you need a particular piece of technology to do something, if you see what I mean, but rather being adaptable and being able to respond to requirements of that space to articulate what you want to say. Oh, some more questions.
Carrie.
The term multimedia. Oh, yes.
Oh no, there are more questions, but there's something that I think I've really learned from you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I never really lived up to expectations, but now. Sorry, Rob.
I think there's a bit of a lag, but there's something that you spoke when you were last here.
Yes.
You spoke about riffing, and I remember reading a paper that you'd written about this relationship between an audience and an author or an artist, and I thought there was something integral to all of your work across different media, that you listen and you create dialogue, and there's this sort of horizontal openness to your work. You don't seem to have a preconceived idea about what the end is, and it's about that journey and that kind of evolving relationship with an audience. I think that's really kind of unique to your work.
You're absolutely right, and in fact, I'm doing the same thing for the V&A project, if you see what I mean, where I'm creating basically inverse chroma keys, so to enable audiences to go in there, the work itself. And the reason why that's a good reminder about the riffing is the reason why I use that is because I'd say kind of methodologies is about, it really is about the energy that comes from something that's live. As a live performer myself, I really enjoy that sense of being almost on the precipice of both success when you're performing, and you're about to, it's not about making a mistake. They're basically riding the dynamic of what you're doing. In my installation pieces, what I'm doing really is I'm trying to create innovative means for the audience to participate in that, in a sense, really. They're part of that dialogue with both me as the author, as the artist, and the installation itself. It's an ongoing, evolving sort of generative piece, which is based on, it is riffing. It's based on the dialogue between different elements, which all then come together within the piece itself as they kind of, as a whole. And it's a delicate balancing act, because you're creating basically a system, if you see what I mean, as opposed to a fixed linear piece, which I have to say I enjoy and I work on sometimes, if you see what I mean. But I just happen to work on what are known as hypermedia, hypertextual pieces, which have many different outcomes, many different narratives, where the audience are implicated in the authorship of that, whether they are explicitly doing that or not, through their sheer movement or invitation to some shape or form, embed themselves in the piece itself. And in a sense, you're working around sort of like mixed reality, and it could be as clever as a telemetric project where you're embedding people from different spaces, or it could be as simple as people within just one space simply contributing different elements to something, which then kind of like cohesively come together and experience together. Does that make sense? Oh, Desmond's took me way back to my youth. Yep, absolutely.
Brilliant, Gary. Thanks so much for the talk. I think we probably we need to end it here, and otherwise we're going to bump into the following talk. But I don't know if you want to add anything, Rob, or
so
it's been really
wait
insightful.
for the moderators to tell me what to do next. I'm quite happy to continue talking.
Maybe Gary can't hear us.
Rob or Dan to let me know how we proceed from this point.
Gary, if you can hear me, I think we need to wrap up, because there's another speaker on at 12.
All right.
Okay, so I think probably we've lost Gary for some reason, and oh no, maybe he's here. Hold on.
I'm back.
Hi, Gary. Are you back? Can you hear us?
I'm back. Yes. Okay.
So we were just probably going to wrap up there, but and I don't think maybe you couldn't hear us. So but we'll say it again. But you know, thanks so much for a great talk and really insightful. And I think what was really great was the amount of questions that were coming in from the students, which is always a good sign, I think, of an engaging talk and something which is inspiring. So yeah, no, thanks again for joining us, and just remind everyone that the next talk is at 12 o'clock, and it's someone that Paul, for the technician, has kind of put forward. So really sort of like into technical kind of 3D printing and other kind of stuff. But anyway, thanks Gary and Rob for taking us through that, and hopefully we can see you in person soon, and maybe you come and join us and in real life.
Yes.
Thank you, Gary, so much.
And also, I saw Roger Robinson last night behind you.
Ah, right, yeah. Roger, that side? No, this side. Yeah, he's been in a few times and been definitely a favourite of the students. So yeah.
I went to see him at Cafe Opera last night.
B3 Media, if you see me. So.
Brilliant, guys. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you again.
Okay, see you later.
Thank you. Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Rob. See you, Dan.
See you, Gary.